by people who were into aliens, man. George Washington, man, he was in a cult. And the cult was into aliens, man. You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, man, they were way into that.
When Dazed and Confused got released in the year 1993, it took the entire Hollywood by storm. It has become a cultural landmark and follows the comedic story about a group of Texas teenagers on the last day of high school. We encourage you to grab a seat and pick up your popcorn to enjoy these 20 dazed and confused facts you might not have known. Number 20. It was a box office flop. It might be hard to believe now, but when Dazed and Confused was released in 1993, it didn't do well at the box office. In fact, it flopped, making just $8 million. For a movie with a budget of $6.9 million, it made a profit of $1.1 million. Of course, the film did have lasting financial success. It sold big on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. The movie's soundtrack also eventually went on to win a double platinum, which was back when soundtracks did that. When people look back now, it almost feels strange that a film like Dazed and Confused was not an instant success. Many thought it would catch on right away because of its sharp writing, funny characters, and authentic portrayal of the 1970s. Instead, it had to take the long road. What happened is something we see once in a while in film history. A movie comes out, does not grab much attention, but then slowly builds a loyal following year after year. The home video market in the 1990s saved it. Young audiences who were not even born when the story occurred discovered it for the first time on tape and later on disc. They are related to the sense of freedom, the rebellion, and the awkwardness of teenage life. The movie became a ritual watch at parties, dorm rooms, and late nights with friends. It was not just a comedy anymore. It became a cultural symbol and would continue to be that for a long time. Number 19. A big part of the budget went towards securing the rights to the soundtrack. Speaking of an iconic film soundtrack, what would Dazed and Confused be without timeless classic rock tunes like Bob Dylan's Hurricane, Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion, and Alice Cooper's School's Out? The director Richard Linklater knew how vital this music was to the movie's production. He dedicated a large part of the budget, nearly 1/6 of the total cost, to the rights to use these songs. That decision was risky at the time because the movie already had a limited budget, but it was one of the most intelligent creative choices he ever made. The music does not simply play in the background. It created a powerful energy in the scenes and made the audience feel like they were part of the 1970s. Without those songs, the movie would have lacked the spirit that made it unforgettable. The soundtrack later became a massive part of the film's legacy. It sold well on its own and introduced younger generations to the music of the 70s. For many fans, hearing those tracks today still brings back memories of watching the film for the first time. The combination of sound and story created a nostalgic feeling that no other teen comedy has matched. Linklater's insistence on using authentic music showed how much he valued realism, making the film the masterpiece it is today. Number 18. It's one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite all-time movies. In the year 2012, Sight and Sound magazine conducted a survey, and shockingly, Quentin Tarantino included Dazed and Confused as one of his 12 favorite movies. He placed it alongside films like The Great Escape, Taxi Driver, The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, and Carrie. This was not just an ordinary praise for a filmmaker well known for his deep film knowledge like Tarantino. He admired the way Richard Linklater captured the raw truth of youth without needing an elaborate plot. Tarantino spoke at length about Dazed and Confused during the Texas Hall of Fame Awards in the year 2013. He called it the only movie 3 generations of college students have seen multiple times. That comment showed just how powerful and timeless the film had become. Movies that resonate across generations are rare, yet this one bridges the gap between parents, children, and grandchildren. The respect from Tarantino added to the film's cult status. It was no longer just a sleeper hit that grew on home video. Today, Dazed and Confused continues to stand tall, proving that authenticity and heart can matter more than box office numbers. It remains a favorite for both casual fans and serious filmmakers alike. Number 17. Lots of future stars were turned down for roles. During the casting calls for the movie, the casting director Don Phillips turned down many actors who would later become successful stars. According to him, every young actor in Los Angeles at that time wanted to be a part of Dazed and Confused. Claire Danes, Elizabeth Berkley, Ashley Judd, Brendan Fraser, Jon Favreau, and Vince Vaughn were all considered for roles but did not make the final cut. Vaughn was even in the running for the role of Fred O'Banion, the brutal bully, but that part ultimately went to Ben Affleck. This kind of story makes the movie's casting even more fascinating. While many talented actors missed out, those who were chosen ended up shaping careers in unexpected ways. Matthew McConaughey, for instance, was not originally supposed to have a significant role. Yet his laid-back performance as Wooderson became one of the film's most quoted parts. His line about high school girls later became legendary, marking the beginning of his rise to stardom. What stands out is how the film boosted the acting careers of many actors while also leaving audiences curious about what could have been if those other names had joined. Imagine Ashley Judd in a significant role, or Vince Vaughn as the infamous O'Banion. These what-if scenarios only add to the film's myth. Don Phillips himself believed that the movie captured lightning in a bottle. He knew that the chemistry between the chosen cast members was special. The friendships, rivalries, and the energy they brought to the screen could not have been planned any better. That is why, even decades later, Dazed and Confused still feels so authentic and unforgettable. Number 16. The title is a reference to a Led Zeppelin song. The director Richard Linklater gave an insight into the inspiration for the title during an interview with Dazed magazine. He revealed that the title was taken from the Led Zeppelin song of the same name. It was meant to accompany the idea that it takes a full decade to process your teenage years. Unfortunately, Linklater could not secure the rights to any of Led Zeppelin's music for the film. The band, protective of their catalog, was not interested in licensing their songs for movies at the time. This disappointed Linklater since Led Zeppelin had defined much of the sound of the 1970s. Even so, the absence of their music did not weaken the soundtrack. Instead, it opened the door for a broad mix of other classic rock tracks that gave the film its unique sound. The title itself worked as more than just a reference. It became a statement. The movie was not about one character or one clear storyline. It was about the haze of youth, the uncertainty of the future, and the search for identity. It captured the strange mix of freedom and confusion that comes with growing up, where every night feels like it could change your life, yet nothing ever really does. Audiences related to that feeling, whether they grew up in the 70s, the 90s, or even later. Looking back, the fact that Led Zeppelin's music never made it into the film adds to its legend. Fans often wonder what it would have been like with Dazed and Confused, the song playing in the background. Yet the film managed to define its own identity without it, proving that the movie was a masterpiece even without the soundtrack Linklater originally wanted. Number 15. One of the young actors became successful in an entirely different field. Hope you are still with us because here is another out-of-pocket fact. At the same time, many of the movie's cast members became famous Hollywood actors. That was not true for Wiley Wiggins, who played Mitch Kramer. His acting career after the film was quiet, but not because he lacked talent or could not make it in Hollywood. Wiggins was simply interested in something else. He shifted his focus toward video games, where he found a new creative outlet. He went on to design and develop games while running an independent gaming festival called Fantastic Arcade. Even though he turned much of his energy toward gaming, he did not give up acting altogether. Wiggins continued to take part in a few unique projects. One was Richard Linklater's experimental animated film Waking Life, released in 2001. The movie was a trippy philosophical journey that used a style called rotoscoping, and Wiggins played an essential role in its wandering conversations about dreams and meaning. Years later, he also appeared in Computer Chess, a quirky independent film that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2013. The movie, filmed in a vintage black-and-white style, became a festival favorite. Wiggins stood out for choosing a different path than most of his Dazed and Confused co-stars. While others chased prominent studio roles and red carpet fame, he leaned into his passions for art, technology, and community building. His journey shows that success does not always mean becoming a blockbuster star. For him, the real win was following what he loved, whether on screen or through the creative gaming world. Number 14. Linklater was sued by some of his real-life classmates. Richard Linklater was not especially creative when making up a character's name. Several names used for characters at the fictional Lee High School were the names of people he knew in real life. At least 3 characters' last names, Wooderson, Floyd, and Slater, were taken from real classmates Linklater had known at Huntsville High School in Texas. This decision eventually landed him in legal trouble. In the year 2004, the real-life men with those names filed a defamation lawsuit against him. They argued that the movie had damaged their reputations, since the characters who carried their names were shown drinking, smoking, and getting into all kinds of teenage mischief. According to the real Wooderson, Floyd, and Slater, the film's cult success led to years of unwanted attention. Strangers, especially younger fans, constantly approached them, wanting to hang out, drink, and party, believing they were just like the characters from the movie. The lawsuit made headlines, raising questions about artistic freedom versus personal identity. Could a director take names from real people without their consent? Was it fair to link someone's name to fictional behavior that might not reflect who they were? Ultimately, the case was dismissed, and Linklater was cleared of wrongdoing. It shows that while the film was celebrated for its authenticity, that same realism blurred lines in ways Linklater never intended. For the classmates whose names were used, the movie was less a nostalgic trip and more a lifelong reminder of high school fame they never asked for. Number 13. Slater's line about George Washington was actually true. Slater, who Rory Cochrane played the role of one of Lee High School's potheads. He stood out as a free spirit who always had far-out theories about history, government, and life. One of his most memorable lines came during a scene where he insisted that George Washington himself was a smoker. Slater confidently said, "George toked weed, are you kidding me, man? He grew fields of that stuff, man." Like many of Slater's ramblings, the truth was hidden in his wild claim. Washington did, in fact, grow hemp at Mount Vernon. Hemp was a common crop during the 18th century because it was valuable for making rope, sails, and clothing. It is also true that early drafts of the Declaration of Independence were written on paper from the plant. However, there is little to no historical evidence suggesting that Washington grew or smoked the psychoactive substance. Historians believe he was far more concerned with using the substance as an industrial crop than for personal recreation. The humor of Slater's character is that he constantly added real history with his own stoner imagination, creating stories that sounded convincing in the moment. This mix of fact and fantasy helped make him one of the most beloved characters in Dazed and Confused. For audiences, he represented the comic relief of teenage culture, that friend who always had a bizarre explanation for everything. Rory Cochrane's laid-back delivery made the character Slater unforgettable. Although Cochrane would go on to play more serious roles in later films and television, for many fans, he will always be remembered as the guy who related substance use to George Washington. Number 12. Linklater tried to keep the atmosphere professional. Richard Linklater has often spoken about the way he ran the set of Dazed and Confused. Despite the film's heavy focus on teenage drinking and substance use, he claimed to have enforced a surprisingly strict professional atmosphere. According to him, no form of any substance was allowed during filming. Linklater explained, "People are surprised how militant I am about that work ethic. I set a tone he wanted the young cast to treat the project seriously. Still, the irony of making a film steeped in stoner culture was not lost on anyone." By Linklater's own admission, while the marijuana shown on camera was fake, not every cast member stayed completely sober. Over the years, several actors admitted that they were high on substances during certain scenes, particularly toward the end of the movie when the characters gather after a long night of partying. Those confessions only added to the myth surrounding the production. The tension between Linklater's disciplined directing style and the cast's youthful energy mirrors the movie. That balance may be one of the reasons the film felt so authentic. The young actors were allowed to bring their personalities to the screen, even if it sometimes meant bending the rules. For fans, knowing that some of the laughter and hazy looks came from real experiences makes the film even more legendary. It blurred the line between acting and reality, capturing the spirit of youth in a way no script alone could achieve. Number 11. Linklater and Universal Pictures were constantly at odds with the movie. Richard Linklater's vision for Dazed and Confused did not always go with what Universal Pictures had in mind. In fact, the director and the studio were often at odds throughout the making of the film. From the start, Universal pushed for a PG-13 rating. Executives believed a lower rating would open the door to a bigger teenage audience and, in turn, better box office numbers. Linklater quickly shot that idea down. He famously responded, "We have 78 uses of the F word in the script, pot smoking all the way through, and teenagers drinking and driving." There was simply no way the movie could be trimmed down to fit a PG-13 label without destroying the vision he had for the movie. The studio eventually agreed to accept an R rating, but even then, disagreements did not stop. Executives later complained that Linklater had not taken full advantage of the rating. From their perspective, if the movie is restricted to adult audiences, it should include the type of entity or shock value that might sell more tickets. Linklater, however, had no interest in adding cheap thrills. Unlike a glossy teen comedy with realistic scenes, he wanted the story to feel natural, drawn from real experiences. These creative clashes reveal how unusual Dazed and Confused was in the studio system. Linklater resisted pressure to conform to marketing strategies, staying committed to what he wanted for his script. His refusal to bend to studio demands paid off. While the movie was not a big hit at first, it later grew into a beloved cult classic that is now cherished and loved by people decades after it was released. Number 10. Linklater saw it as a complete opposite of John Hughes' movies. Richard Linklater often explained that he saw Dazed and Confused as an inverse of John Hughes's teen movies. Hughes was famous for films like 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Pretty in Pink. Those movies usually ended with a big kiss or some dramatic change in a teenager's life. They were fun and meaningful, but they showed high school as a place where everything felt big and life-changing just because the characters fell in love. Linklater wanted to do something different. He thought back to his own teenage years in the 1970s and remembered them in an entirely different way. He said, "I do not remember teenage years being that dramatic. I remember trying to go with the flow, socialize, fit in, and be cool. The stakes were really low. To get Aerosmith tickets or not, that is a big thing." That simple idea shaped the entire film. The story follows teenagers day and night, showing them at parties and providing insight into their conversations and little adventures. Nothing earth-shattering happens, yet the small details make it feel real. Everyone remembers being young and worrying about things that now seem silly, like who you were hanging out with or whether you looked cool at the party. This was the magic of Linklater's approach. Focusing on the everyday, he captured the true spirit of being a teenager. The film reminded audiences that growing up is not always about significant dramatic changes. Sometimes it is just about finding friends, killing time, and making memories that only later feel important. Number 9. From Extra to a Star. Wiley Wiggins did not walk onto the set of Dazed and Confused expecting to become a lead character. In fact, he initially signed up just to be an extra, one of the many background teenagers that were meant to appear in the halls and parties of the movie. Yet fate had something else in mind. The producers noticed him right away. According to Wiggins, it was partly because of his unusual name and naturally long hair, which made him look like he had stepped out of the 1970s. He was finally offered the role of Mitch Kramer. It was a massive opportunity for a teenager with no acting experience. For Wiggins, it was both exciting and shocking. He was suddenly acting alongside actors who would go on to become household names, including Ben Affleck and Matthew McConaughey, yet his presence worked perfectly. Looking back, Wiggins admitted that being chosen out of the crowd was not something he expected, but it also showed how Linklater wanted authenticity over perfection. Sometimes the best casting choice is not the most experienced actor, but the person who feels right for the role. In Dazed and Confused, Wiley Wiggins was that person. Number 8. the love story that made it to real life. Mirroring their characters' on-screen relationships, Mila Jovovich, who played Michelle Burrows, and Kevin Pickford, who played Sean Andrew, ran away to Las Vegas and got married during the shoot. It was the kind of wild decision that perfectly fit the rebellious spirit of the movie. Yet in reality, it was a move that raised eyebrows. The fact that Jovovich was only 16 years old at the time, far below the legal age to marry without parental consent. Her mother quickly intervened once the news surfaced, and the marriage was later annulled. What seemed like a romantic adventure during filming became just another chapter in the unpredictable stories surrounding the cast. For Jovovich, the marriage was a brief moment in a long career that would eventually take her to international fame. She went on to star in major films like The Fifth Element and the Resident Evil series, becoming one of the most recognizable faces of action cinema. For Andrews, the spotlight faded more quickly, and his career never reached the same heights. Still, the Las Vegas wedding remains one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes stories from Dazed and Confused. The incident also portrayed how young many of the cast members truly were. Even though they played teenagers on screen, they were teenagers in real life. Number 7. The strange story of how Matthew McConaughey got the role. Who would have thought Matthew McConaughey's path to Dazed and Confused was unplanned? In fact, it happened almost by accident. It all started one night in Austin, Texas, when he met casting director Don Phillips at a local bar. The two hit it off immediately, talking, laughing, and drinking together. Before long, they were kicked out for being too loud and too drunk. What could have been a wild night out changed McConaughey's life forever. Phillips liked McConaughey's easy charm and personality. He thought he would be perfect for the part of David Wooderson, the older guy who still hangs around high school parties. McConaughey was not a professional actor yet, but his laid-back attitude and natural confidence stood out. Phillips encouraged him to audition, and Linklater immediately saw great potential in him when he did. At first, McConaughey's role was meant to be very small. Wooderson was supposed to appear in only a few scenes. However, McConaughey's performance was so magnetic that Linklater kept expanding the part. Soon, Wooderson became one of the most iconic characters in the entire movie. His lines, like the famous "all right, all right, all right," made him a memorable character. For McConaughey, this chance meeting at a bar launched a career that would eventually make him an Oscar-winning actor. Looking back, it is almost unbelievable that such a huge success came from something as random as bumping into the right person at the right place. It shows how opportunity can appear in the most unexpected ways. Without that night in Austin, movie history might have missed one of its most memorable characters. Number 6. The backstory everyone missed. One of the most memorable parts of Dazed and Confused was the hazing scenes, where the older high school kids chased the freshmen with large wooden paddles. The actors were allowed to design their paddles, decorating them however they wanted. Each paddle had a personality, just like the characters who carried it. One paddle had a special detail that only sharp-eyed fans might notice. It was engraved with the number 17. This was not random. It was a nod to the gap of years between the movie's setting in 1976 and the time when the film was made in 1993. For the cast, the paddles became more than props. They were a way to feel connected to their characters and the period they were portraying. By designing the paddles themselves, the young actors added an extra layer of realism to the film. Of course, no real harm was done during filming. The paddles were symbolic primarily, a playful but exaggerated part of high school culture in the 70s. Still, the engraving of 17 shows how much thought and detail went into the making of Dazed and Confused. It was those small touches that helped turn the film into something unforgettable. Number 5. Two of the actors didn't get along. Not everything behind the scenes of Dazed and Confused was fun. Two actors, Sean Andrews, who played Kevin Pickford, and Jason London, who played Randall Pink Floyd, did not get along during filming. In fact, their arguments got so bad that director Richard Linklater had to step in more than once. At one point, he even had to break up a fight between the two physically. This tension between the actors caused problems for the movie. Linklater originally planned for Pickford to play a bigger role in the story. In the original ending, it was supposed to be Pickford, not Wooderson, who joined Pink on the final car ride to buy Aerosmith tickets. However, because Andrews and London could not work together peacefully, Linklater changed his plan. Instead, Wooderson, played by Matthew McConaughey, filled the role, which ended up becoming one of the film's most iconic moments. Their conflict also explains something many fans have noticed. Even though Pink and Pickford are in several scenes together, they rarely speak directly to each other. The lack of dialogue was not an artistic choice at first, it was simply a way to keep the peace on set. In the long run, the fight might have been a blessing in disguise. Wooderson's character became unforgettable by stepping into the spotlight, launching Matthew McConaughey's career. Still, the story reminds us that what happens behind the camera can sometimes change the entire direction of a movie. Even personal disagreements can end up shaping film history in unexpected ways. Number 4. The lie that changed everything. When Wiley Wiggins was cast as Mitch Kramer in Dazed and Confused, he was only a teenager. He wanted the part badly and said yes when people asked if he could play baseball. The problem was that Wiley had no idea how to pitch or throw like a real baseball player. He lied to get the role, hoping nobody would notice. Once filming began, Richard Linklater, who wrote and directed the movie, quickly realized that Wiley was uncomfortable on the pitcher's mound. Baseball is vital to Mitch's story, so Linklater had to think fast. Instead of making Wiley look awkward on screen, he brought in a double. A double is another person who performs specific actions when the actor cannot do them. In this case, the double was used to film the back shots of Mitch pitching, so that the audience would not realize Wiley did not actually know how to play. Even though Wiley struggled with the sports scenes, his natural look and personality made him perfect for the role of Mitch. He captured the nervous energy of being a freshman surrounded by older kids, which mattered much more than throwing a perfect baseball. His honesty and wide-eyed expressions made him easy for audiences to connect with. In the end, Wiley's small fib did not hurt him. Instead, it showed that sometimes in movies, not everything is exactly as it appears. Number 3. Tragic injury on set. When Ben Affleck joined the cast of Dazed and Confused, he was still very young, years before he became one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He played Fred O'Banion, the mean senior who loved picking on the freshmen. O'Banion carried around a big wooden paddle, which he used in the hazing scenes to scare and hit the younger kids. The character was supposed to be tough and full of anger, and Ben Affleck played him perfectly 2.15 to 2.20. Affleck is swinging a paddle shaped like a cricket bat in one scene. He turns it too hard and loses control, and the heavy piece of wood hits his ankle. The pain is immediate and intense, and he shatters the ankle. Even though he was severely hurt, Affleck surprised everyone by continuing to act. Instead of stopping right away, he finished the scene before getting help. That determination showed how much he cared about doing a good job, even in an early career stage. The injury became one of those behind-the-scenes stories that people remembered long after the movie was finished. For Affleck, it was an early lesson in how unpredictable film sets can be. Sometimes accidents happen, and actors have to push through. Later in life, Affleck would go on to win Academy Awards and star in many famous films. But fans of Dazed and Confused never forgot the moment when a teenage Ben Affleck took a painful hit from his paddle and kept on going. Number 2. The movie got rejected by Lone Star. When Dazed and Confused was made, the producers wanted every detail to feel true to the 1970s. That included the beer that the teenagers drank during the party scenes. At first, the plan was to use Lone Star beer, a genuine Texas brand. It would have been a perfect fit since the movie was set in Texas and the beer was very popular there. The filmmakers decided to contact Lone Star, but the beer company demanded payment and a percentage of the film's profit. The production team did not agree with that. It was too outrageous for a small movie like Dazed and Confused, which did not have a big budget. Richard Linklater and the team had to make a choice. Ultimately, they decided to use plain, generic bottles and cans instead. If you look closely at the party scenes in the film, you will notice that none of the beer brands are real. The labels are blank or very simple. This actually worked in the movie's favor. By not showing a specific brand, the focus stayed on the characters and the fun, not on product placement. Number 1. The actress that was rejected for being classy. Claire Danes, who later became famous for roles in Romeo plus Juliet and Homeland, once auditioned for Dazed and Confused. She wanted the part of Sabrina, the shy freshman girl who gets hazed by the older seniors. Director Richard Linklater watched her audition carefully, but in the end, he thought she did not fit the part. He described Danes as too classy for the character, who was meant to feel more awkward and uncertain. The role eventually went to Kristen Hinojosa. Looking back at all these stories, it becomes clear that Dazed and Confused was far more than just another teen comedy. It was a film born from unexpected choices, lucky breaks, and once-in-a-lifetime moments that rarely happened. The soundtrack, now legendary, came together through a mix of instinct and boldness. The casting, which introduced a generation of actors who would later become stars, resulted from risks rather than safe bets. Even the scene's tension, budget struggles, and little accidents added to the unique energy radiating from the screen. What began as a modest project with a limited budget evolved into something timeless, a movie that continues to resonate with audiences across decades. It captured a nostalgic look at youth in the 1970s and a universal spirit of rebellion, friendship, and fleeting freedom. Decades after its release, Dazed and Confused proves that no other film could replicate its impact. It remains one of the greatest cult classics ever created, an authentic, enduring snapshot of what it feels like to be young, searching, and alive in a world just on the edge of change. Which of these facts do you find the weirdest? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more inspiring content like this. Before you go, kindly watch the other videos on your screen. Thanks for watching.